opportunities, challenges, and journey to space tech startups. First up, it's my honor, it's my privilege to call the first panel onto the stage. May I please request Mr. Vinay Simha, founder, CEO, SkyServe, to kindly come and join us, please, with a big round of applause, of course. Next up, may I please request Mr. Kevin Cherian, Executive Lead, Flight Dynamics and Controls, Agnicul Cosmos, to kindly come and join us. Okay, there you are. Another big round of applause, please. May I also invite Mr. Awais Ahmad, CEO and founder, Pixel Space Srinath, to kindly come and join us, please. A big round of applause one more time. All right, a brilliant panel requires a powerful moderator. May I please call upon the moderator for this session, Mr. Sunil Kavale, Investment Principal, Speciale Invest, to kindly come and join us. Okay, before we take over, single-handedly, can we give a huge round of applause for the next panel? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to have this discussion. As usual, I think the TIE Matrix event attracts a lot of crowd, and glad to have an entire track on aerospace and space this time. Given that the previous sessions were on space tech, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the ecosystem itself. Maybe just a quick background about us at Special. We invest in deep science and deep tech startups. We're a venture capital firm, have been around since 2018. Invested in 5 space tech startups so far. Beyond space tech, we look at areas like semiconductors, robotics, biotech, quantum, climate tech, and so on. And we come in early pre-seed, seed rounds, pre-product, pre-revenue companies, and try to write the first check and underwrite the technology risk in these companies. That's about what we do, but more about the space tech ecosystem. While we have had a very rich heritage of space tech in this country through ISRO over the past 55 years, what has happened over the past 10 years, and maybe even more so over the past 5 years, is we've seen a new wave of startups come in and work in the space tech ecosystem and support ISRO and sometimes complement ISRO as well. So in that regard, we have a couple of we have 3 panelists on stage across different parts of the space tech stack. We have Awais of Pixel, one of the largest startups in India today, space tech startups in India today, and one of the largest overall as well. We have Vinay of SkyServe AI, and we have Kevin of Agnicul Cosmos. And putting all these together, I wanted to use this opportunity to explore the space tech ecosystem from a couple of lenses. One, to look at, or rather majorly to compare what has happened in the past, where we are today, and what can we do, build on top of this and take it forward. So the questions that we would be focusing on would usually compare the past and the present, or the present and the future, so that we get a sense of the progress that we have made or how we can make further. So with that, I'll request panelists to maybe just begin with their introductions and a couple of lines about what they do as an organization, and then we can build on top of that from there.
Thanks for that, Sunil. Hi, I'm Vinay, co-founder and CEO of SkyServe. SkyServe is a edge computing company. We largely process data of the sensors in space on board satellites. We have done a couple of missions across US, Europe, and lastly, the latest mission we worked with NASA JPL, where we hosted 9 of their models as GeoA models in space to infer for vegetation and for water and other cloud studies.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I lead the guidance, navigation, and controls teams and mission design at Agnicul, where we are building launch vehicles for low Earth orbits and generally looking at space transportation systems. So happy to be here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Hi everyone, this is Awais, founder and CEO at Pixel Space Technologies. We are a full stack spacecraft company. What that means is we do everything from designing a satellite and the payload that goes on it, manufacturing it, to putting it up in space through rockets that other organizations are building, and then finally operating these satellites as well as analyzing the data. In 2022, we became the first Indian company to launch a private imaging satellite. ISRO has obviously launched a variety of different satellites, but the first private company to do so. And then we followed that up with 2 more demo satellite launches around the same year. And finally, earlier in January, we launched 3 of our commercial grade satellites, which also became India's first private constellation. What we do uniquely is we are building the world's highest resolution hyperspectral satellites. In a very short sense, human eyes can only see things in 3 wavelengths, but hyperspectral cameras can see things in hundreds of wavelengths. That enables us to see things that are otherwise invisible to human eyes. Things like, is this crop plagued with diseases? Is this fruit rotten? Is there a oil or a gas leak here, and so on and so forth. So the plan is to have about 24 total satellites in addition to the 6 that we have launched that will provide global coverage on a daily basis. So that's about it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Aviz, you have the mic, so maybe we'll begin with you. You've seen the space tech ecosystem evolve in India since your days at Bits and building Pixel over the years. Um, Maybe very quickly, one or two things that have changed over the years from the time you started out, and one or two things that have stayed the same, right? Like in this Indian space tech ecosystem, what would you
Yeah, I think what has changed, probably the two big things that come to mind, is there's a lot more availability of capital for the early stages of space technology companies. I think in 2019 when we started, there were very few VC firms, Special and maybe a few others that were looking at even discussing on investing in space tech companies. This is the pre-seed and the seed stage. Before there is even some sort of a prototype, this is at the idea stage. And you need some amount of capital at that stage to actually be able to experiment and prototype something. So that wasn't there in 2018, 2019, when the private ecosystem had just started sort of waking up. But then once the announcement happened from the finance minister and the prime minister that private space will be privatized, at least over the last couple years to 3 years, there's at least enough capital for anyone who's doing anything half decent at the early stages, so that they can then move on to the next stages. The other thing that has significantly changed is government support, and in multiple ways. One is regulatory. Setting up of InSpace, having the space policy come out, just makes it clear to investors, to companies, to customers, that this is what a space company can do and this is what they cannot do, and here is the process of getting things done. And that lack of clarity plagued the industry pre 2020 announcements of privatizing space. So I think those are the two big changes, not only from a regulatory standpoint, but I think the government is also a lot more open now to procuring from private space companies, giving revenue for the contracts. Things that have remained the same, I think the late stage capital availability is still a problem for companies that want to go big and compete globally. All the largest investment funds rounds that have happened in India have happened from foreign investors leading it. So I think that lack still exists, and I think we're still some time away from the government being a big anchor customer for almost every startup. Like when you compare it to US or Europe, roughly about 20% of the startups that might start up eventually get funding through non-dilutive grants or even through contract. That's not the case in India. So while things are changing, I think those things still have remained the same.
Wonderful. I think the late stage capital part is a major problem that we are seeing across deep tech. Space tech has definitely not been beneficial of that, even with early stage support that has been in this ecosystem. I want to maybe get both Vinay and Kevin to comment on this, and maybe Kevin, we'll go with you first, because with Vinay, I was just before we started, we were talking about talent in space tech. You have worked on the guidance navigation control stack, GNC stack, in Agnikul for the past 5 years. When you are also building something, being one of the very early folks to build a rocket on the private side in this country, how do you go about bringing a team together to solve for these problems? Right? It's not as if so. Most of the talent has been around in ISRO over the past 50 years doing this, but on the private side, there. It's not like people are taught about these things in curriculum and engineering and so on. So when you go about building a team to solve such a complex problem, what are the challenges that you face in putting that team together? And with that, maybe also adding on how perhaps this problem statement has changed over the past 5 years since the time you started with Agnikul and now in 2025. And Vinay, maybe after that, would love to hear your thoughts on that, because we were just speaking on this outside.
So when we started, when I started 5 years ago, there was a whole complete different picture, at least with in terms of hiring or in terms of what kind of opportunities would really show up for these kind of roles. So if I was to really look at just controls engineers, just that one field, uh, almost everybody had a fixed path or they had an exit path straight out of college into something else. And bringing actual talent into startups was always a challenge, because you've got competing streams of work, which the narrative has changed over the last couple of years because more people are aware of the options they have in the deep tech ecosystem right now. Getting people has gotten easier. uh, Training them has been a challenge because problem statements also keep evolving over time, and that has really led to a lot of differences that we've seen just from somebody who's coming straight out of college to somebody who can immediately start working and bringing change to your day-to-day outcomes. That really has that's something that's still on a slow upward trend. It's still taking time, but at least there's a lot more interest, I think, right from school. So we've got people reaching out to us from school for internships, and that's surprising because I mean, not so long ago I was in school, and that was not the story.
Wonderful. Yeah. Vinay, your thoughts?
In some of the experiences that we have had, we have many degree holders but not talent in this case. There's significant gap between what the academics teaches versus what the industry is requires, and that gap is widening by the day, even for industries with so much of changes in the AI areas as well. So from yesterday to today, we are already a stale news in the kind of improvisations in technology. So the challenges that we have, we probably get about 2 3 people that fit the criteria if you go through 1,000 profiles. Largely because when we're processing images, we are building the next level of AI algorithms in space, because we are responsible for a certain level of payload data processing on the satellite. The the error rate is very very minimal for us, and we are responsible for giving a right data product to our satellite operators or our partners, and that comes with huge responsibility. And it space requires, like the way space requires patient capital, it also requires patience in building out the right sort of algorithms, writing out end test cases to make sure it works. So that's where some of the current gen, not to bracket them like that, it requires much more rigorous hygiene in getting the right things out. That's how we broadly see that as of today.
Aviz, maybe your thoughts on this, because you would have solved this at a reasonable scale, and given that how Pixel has grown over the years, how have you seen the talent ecosystem evolve, and how have you managed to bring together the best of people?
Yeah, I think that the talent is there. The question becomes how quickly you want that talent and how long are you willing to wait to get in that talent, right? I think, and it has changed over many years. When we first started hiring folks in maybe 2020, we had to really be very patient. Sometimes it took as long as 6 months to 8 months to hire for a role that we were looking at, right? So let's say we needed guidance, navigation, control lead for our satellites. This role ended up coming from someone at ISRO who wanted to move out from ISRO and look at what the private side was bringing, but that was very far and few between. Lots of folks do not want to leave ISRO, which is a very prestigious organization. There are sort of family pressures as well to be in a government job. So that has been like the smallest percentage of where folks have come from. There's like an immense amount of talent pool that IAST and ISRO and DRDO and HAL are sort of built up in the aeronautics and space, which we have definitely sort of looked at. Beyond that, I think we have quite a few good universities with a lot of talented folks. Some of them want to go look for higher studies in the US, but a few of them don't want to do that. Or even the folks that have gone out and done, let's say, postgraduate studies in the US and they want to come back to India, they might not necessarily have worked on space technology, and that's okay. We are okay to be like, okay, you know what, this person will come in. This person will maybe take sometimes 3 months, sometimes 6 months to learn how the core engineering principles of that person's field might translate to building a satellite or building a component of the satellite. But that's a worthwhile investment we are doing sort of in the long run, right? So most of our senior leaders that we have in the company today, like probably greater than 90% of them, they were hired 5 years or 4 years ago, and they've sort of grown into that role. And they might not have had the same amount of experience then, but now they've seen an entire satellite built from design to going up to space and sort of bringing it down. We hire a lot from adjacent industries as well. So, right, for example, if you're looking at hiring for the electrical power system for our satellite, we have hired quite a few folks from the EV industry that's out there. Ather, Ola Electric, and a few others that you're working on the battery management system for an electric vehicle. A lot of the same basic principles apply to here as well. We hire a lot of folks from aeronautical companies, Boeing, HAL, and others who have worked on structures for planes, but then you can bring that expertise to bear for structures for satellites as well. So it's a combination of a bunch of these things. But as Vinay rightly said, the signal to noise ratio is very low. It's not like we can't hire folks, but if someone is very software oriented, you can't hire them for like a very hardware oriented role unless you're willing to give about 1 year of training at least for someone completely new to that. But in most cases, as long as someone has strong fundamentals, you can get them, and then they themselves will sort of grow with the company in six months or so.
Wonderful, wonderful. Um, Kevin, one of the things that Agnikul, when they started out in 2017, 2018, is that while you're building, being one of the first people to build a rocket out of this country on the private side, you also have to bring the ecosystem together along with you, right? It's so that you need to, if you have to get talent, if you have to do testing, if you have to convince the government, convince ISRO that yes, you are capable of doing this. You need a space on. You need a platform to launch these. So there's a lot of bringing together the entire value chain and the ecosystem and suppliers and vendors to make specific components and parts for you. How do you imagine how was that journey solving that particular bit for Agnikul? And going forward, we see given that we see a lot of new space startups coming up today, do you see that becoming easier for the companies which are coming up today? Like you've been the front runner and you've sorted some of these problems for them, and thereby does life become easier for them? Is it easier to raise capital because of this? Is it easier to build something very quickly with lesser capital? So if you could help us understand how the ecosystem plays a role in this.
Just to build systems, I guess the first thing that we would really need capital for would be testing, where that immediately pulls in something that you had for product away from product itself, but you have to build the test rigs and build the capacity to do that. I think over time what we've seen is that the existing ecosystem that used to do a little bit more at a gentler pace has started to adapt to the demands of a startup like us. That was a churn. That takes some digestion. You need to go meet them in person, get them to understand, and let them understand you. And that takes a little bit of back and forth, maybe a couple of orders here and there. You understand how they work, they understand how you work. But there is no other way. You just have to go through that process. And once the ecosystem begins to understand that startups will come with a certain kind of pressure, will come with a certain kind of drive to do certain things in a certain rate, they'll start adapting. And definitely I would love to be a startup starting now than 5 years ago. But I think the challenges are different at different times. At this point, somebody starting now would face something similar to what we faced when there's always something different that always has to happen in every 5 years. So something else is probably driving the change now, and the problems will be different, but at least the problems that were there 5 years ago are a little bit lesser, and that's a little bit smoother for probably people trying it out now.
Wonderful. Vinay, I'll just circle back to you. I think with SkyServe, you've been working on solving for processing data on the edge in space, right? And the we've noticed that for a lot of startups, the go-to method to show space heritage is to go via the Poem platform and do a quick demonstration there. It's a great validation for the product, for the team internally. But to my knowledge, at least, you didn't go via the Poem platform, right? So you went directly to customers, right? So a two-part question. One, what guided that decision to go directly to customers? What how do perceptions change if you demonstrate it on a platform like Poem vis-a-vis demonstrating it with a customer? Perceptions internally within the team perceptions to the external world amongst investors, potential customers, future customers?
When we looked at Poem about 4+ years ago, Poem was the next version of iteration, and when we wanted to place
Sorry, if I may request, just for the audience, if you could maybe talk about what Poem is, so that in case the audience
Poem
is
is
not aware.
a experimental payload envelope that you get on PSLV, on which you can send affordable experiments to get some space heritage, have some mission life, conduct a set of experiments so that you can increase your technology readiness maturity. If you say you're in TRL 3, you could go to 6 or 7 based on that. It's also a critical value add from the maturity for any space tech startup. Unlike aligning as a full payload where you pay a lot of money, instead of that, you would have it in an extremely subsidized or a free flight that the government gives you, and that's a great benefit for the ecosystem. Having said that as a background, when we looked at about 4+ years ago on the Poem, we our first attempt, as you probably guessed, was the Poem. But when we looked at the payload envelope that we would get, the power supply that we would get, the interfaces that we would get, or the sensors for which we would perform operations on, there seems to be, and the mission life of experimentation that we would get, there were some trade-offs across the board for all of these. For example, the power would get unregulated. The Ethernet was one of the high bitrate compute data processing that we would do would not be there. They had different kind of interfaces. The payload had a different kind of a constructs and stuff like that. And end of the day, we also looked at saying if we were to work with customers and we would want to work with a constellation to give value add for them, they would trust what happens with them rather than what happens outside. So they know the data product, they know the data processing pipeline, they know the level of processing that's happening on board a satellite. So it's a question of trust that the space is all heritage business, and they know the platforms as well and the sensors. It's easier for us to have that story of trust and taking it forward from there. And that's when we, instead of doing it poem, we did that with the flights that we have with satellite partners in US and Europe. That's what drove us on that. So that's the first part. That's where we were able to get some sense of maturity, product maturity, go back and show that, and we were able to. We also had an extended mission life where we could work with the partners to get this out. That's the first. So that pretty much helped us establish for repeat flights as well. And when they're deploying constellations, we'll be able to iterate with them and provide the valued services for them on an ongoing basis. Those are the drivers for it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Vinay. We have about 8 minutes, about 9 minutes to go. And I do want to have a couple of minutes for a few questions from the audience. But before that, Awais, to you, you have an office and you have teams sitting out of both India and the US. You've constantly looked at both the ecosystems. You've had exposure there. Having interacted with that ecosystem, with the US ecosystem, and perhaps the global space tech ecosystem as well, what is the perception of space tech, especially space tech startups in India at this point of time? And again, the question on how has it changed over the years, right? Is the Indian space tech movement still highly regarded? Is it highly regarded? Is it something to look out for in the West, or is there lack of awareness of what's happening? What has been your read of the situation? And maybe just to add on to that, what do you think that we should do going forward to perhaps strengthen our position in the global stage as well?
Yeah, I think the perception in the global stage has always been stellar. Not due to anything that the private space sector has done so much as what ISRO has been able to do over the last 4 or 5 decades, right? And I can speak to that because the first time when we started the company Pixel, right, this was 2019. We were college students coming out of BITS Pilani. We had a few ISRO experts who had retired, who were sort of helping us, and so on and so forth. But then when we got the opportunity to go to the Techstars Accelerator in Los Angeles, where we were able to interact with JPL, NASA, with the US Air Force, with the Aerospace Corporation that the accelerator brought together, you could see that they all held the Indian space program in general in very high regard. And that thankfully kind of came over us as an umbrella that, okay, these are, students who we still hadn't graduated at that point in time. and the fact that they're coming from a country that has a deep space heritage gave us a little bit more credence than we would have if we had come from some other country, for example, right? So I think that's always been there. That goes to show with the fact that, for example, NISAR is going to launch in a few months, which is a joint satellite, SAR satellite, being worked between ISRO and JPL. So these collaborations between whether that's NASA, ISRO, whether that's ESA, ISRO, whether that's JAXA, ISRO, there have been many of these over the last few years, and we are definitely one of the top three, top four space agencies in the world, and that has continued. I think what has started to change is now the West, Europe or US, has started to look at Indian space tech companies as well in a little bit of a higher regard on their own, especially with the few successes. There's still a long way to go, but with a few at least successes on our way there, with Skyroot and Agnikul both attempting their first suborbital launches, orbital launches to come soon, with us launching our satellites, with Gantara Space also following up with their satellite as well. So I think there's quite a few of the startups now, at least five of them that have put hardware in space up there. SkyServe and folks have put components that go into these satellites. So these are all, I think, on their own, the Indian space private ecosystem is starting to stand out. A lot more to do. For example, when, let's say, a satellite company anywhere globally wants to launch a satellite, they are going to either look at SpaceX today, which is the number one choice for anyone given the number of launches that they do, or they will likely look at ISRO PSLV or SSLV, given the track record that's there. But they won't likely, until proven orbital launches or until satellites have been proven in space or components have been proven in space, they won't have the Indian space tech companies as their first choice, right? And that comes back to the government, needing to be a bigger supporter, being big contract purchasers in the early stages, so that not just investor money but also revenue money can be shown from these startups, which can then help these grow and get more maturity and get more space heritage, so that we can then go and compete toe to toe, private company to private company, with any US company or with any European company or any other country for that matter.
Wonderful. Um, we have about 4.5 minutes. Before I take questions from the audience, maybe to each of the panelists over the next 12 months, maybe very quickly in 1 or 2 points, what is it that you're looking out for? What do you want to solve? What are my big milestones for the company over the next 12 months? Maybe Vinay will begin with you.
In the next 12 months, we're in the midst of fundraise, so we hopefully close it soon. And we have set ourselves an aggressive path of about 15 flights to do. Hopefully, if we can complete about half of that, and that would be something that we would be definitely.
For us, the writing's clear. We just need to get to orbit very quickly. I think that would be not even a year is, I think, our goal with that. And I think we are also looking at space transportation systems overall, where you look at different things that you can do with your last stage. So we've been thinking about some things along those lines, and generally because liquid engines, they give us a few other ideas that we would love to try out. I think that's something that's been on our minds.
Yeah, I think the follow up to the Firefly launches that we had in January, 3 more will go up in the next couple of months. We'll follow that up with one more larger 200 kg class satellite that we are launching before the end of this year, and followed with hopefully the satellite that we're building for the Indian Air Force going up to space as well, which will be our first delivered satellite to the Indian government, and hopefully that will lead to many more. So those are the three big things.
Wonderful. Quick questions from the audience. We have a few minutes to go. Yes, the gentleman at the back. Can we have someone with the mic, please? Okay, we'll take the question here and then we'll come. Yes.
Hi, Avais. How are you? Divyanshu here. My question is that with the three Firefly satellites going up, and I'm sure you guys have already got some of that hyperspectral data there. Sorry, multispectral data there. I just wanted to know what kind of adoption are you seeing on a commercial level? Are there any POCs that you guys have already done? What kind of insights have you been able to commercially create, not just from a scientific or an R&D standpoint?
Yeah, I mean it is hyperspectral data,
Sorry.
about 150 wavelengths or so. So we've done a few commercial scale engagements. I think the NASA the deal that we signed with them was a big one around climate science. So the data is being used for water quality indices. We were able to detect phytoplankton generations, for example, in a lot of lakes that happen in the US, as well as being able to look at water quality near the Arctic and the Antarctic regions, and so on and so forth. So I think that's one. We've been able to work with agricultural companies to identify soil nutrient content. A little bit, we've been able to identify species, crop species, what species and subspecies of crops are growing, and we've been able to work with one oil and gas company on detecting potential oil leakages near the pipelines. Right, just a few of the many examples. There are roughly 60 or so customers that we have been engaging with over the past few months. The data right now, we're being very selective with sharing it, because this is the first time these satellites have launched, and calibration, validation, etc. sort of takes some time and it requires feedback. But I think probably in the next couple of months you'll have a lot of open source data and open data set as well on the website that anyone can get access to. But as of now, I think the feedback's been thankfully much better than we expected for the first commercial satellites that went up, and almost all the industries we wanted to touch, we have touched. I think mining is something that we will sort of look at next.
The question to all three of you. My name is Krishanu Kaul. We're investment bankers focused on technology and more broadly deep tech as a sector. My understanding, my sort of question was how far do you think India as an economy is from commercial space travel and more broadly, let's say, human space travel? It's an evolving sector, especially in North America. I find it particularly fascinating that none of our billionaires are into it as opposed to those in North America, and everyone's trying to get on the bandwagon. And I don't know what the reason is. I'm sure you all are in a better place to understand that. But how far are we from commercial space travel? How far are we from that sector or subsector in tech maturing and actually seeing traction from investors on a day-to-day basis?
Just in the interest of time, can I request one of you to maybe respond to that?
I think India really needs to understand that commercial means a lot more launches. I think the entire ecosystem has to step up for understanding that that takes a lot more than policy. It takes a lot more preparedness, and I think it's a matter of time. I think it's a little bit of digestion that has to happen, and you will see that with other indicators around you. I think that's the best I can
So
say.
what's your thesis? 10 years?
I think, see, ISRO will put a Indian man or woman in space in the next 2 years is my hope. 2 to 3 years, given the pace at which Gaganyaan test, etc. are happening. But with regards to private companies launching humans, it will take first companies to send satellites to orbit, and then expand that to heavy launch vehicles for launching heavier stuff into orbit, and then you have to human rate that heavy launch vehicle to actually send people. ISRO has had the last 3-4 decades work to build on top of, and so they'll do it much more quickly. But for a private company to do so, I would probably say not less than 10 years, even if you're moving at full speed ahead, for a human to launch on a privately built launch vehicle from India.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. General.
Yeah, hi. I have a couple of questions. You can choose to answer any. The first is for the moderator, Sunil, right? Is how do you source deals in space tech? And my subsequent questions related are, if I were to set up an incubator for space tech, and this is a new field for me, where should I go? Should I go to a university, to an IIT, which Pilani, or there is a better place which is already being supported by the government in some way?
Sure. I think first part, where do we source? I think we have very smart people coming out of academia at this point of time, having been through their aerospace programs, either in their bachelor's, master's, or sometimes doing PhD as well, have seen the success of early space tech startups in Dhruva, Agnikul, Skyroot, Pixel, Galaxy, and so on. And they're ambitious, they're bold, and want to build out something in this particular space. So academia is a very strong source. What I've been noticing is that there are a lot of founders coming out of Pixel at this point of time, right? So I think Awais and the team are doing a great job in inspiring the next generation of talent to build, not just only in space tech, but even beyond in other sectors, allied sectors as well. So I think these companies are becoming breeding grounds for the next generation of entrepreneurs. I think beyond that, looking at ex-ISRO candidates who are coming out of ISRO, inspired by what is happening on the private side, candidates coming out of, let's say, something like IIST in Trivandrum. So I think those have been the larger pockets of talent pools that we are seeing. startup pools that we are seeing, and those are usually eventually become the sources where we go to for deals. To the second question, if you want to set up an incubator or an accelerator for SpaceTech today, I think it today the ecosystem is growing. It needn't necessarily be attached to one particular incubator as such, or one particular academic institution as such. And also to say that there isn't any one particular academic institution that we are relating to say, hey, this is where all space tech comes from either, right? There have been successes from BITS. There have been successful BITS in Pilani, BITS in Hyderabad as well. There have been success from IIT Madras, from IISc, from IST, right? So we're seeing enough and more distributed work happening. I would say the southern part of the country is where more of the work is happening. Not to take away anything from BITS Pilani, but a lot of work is happening in the southern part of the country at this point of time. So I think in collaboration, I think the partnerships that you would have with certain organizations that allow startups to get access very quickly with InSpace, with SAC in Ahmedabad, with perhaps in VSSC and so on. So I think those partnerships will be key. The location or affiliations with academic institutions, I wouldn't be too keen on that particular part as such. So yeah, that would
Thank you.
that would be my take. We had one last question. Maybe I know we are out of time. We'll just take one last question and we'll be done. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this question is more for the three of you, right? A lot of the outcome or the data that you guys have created by sending, satellites, any object into space, eventually that needs to be commercialized. Now, if the industry evolves and you find more takers, automatically funding for you guys increases and you can accelerate the pace of your growth, right? So, what are some of the use cases of, beyond fisheries and, whatever was mentioned by ISRO in the previous session as well, that, the data that you guys are generating, and where is it heading and what are the cross cultural or cross industry applications for that kind of data?
Largely, when we process data, primary premise is to make the geospatial data become affordable. Satellites have been in existence for many decades, as Aves was also pointing out. When especially Earth observation electro-optical data, about 70% of Earth's atmosphere is filled with clouds. So when a satellite images, there's a lot of data that's not required to be. So that way, what we are trying to do is sachetize the data product itself. So more use cases come in. That's the area that we come in. So it could be for vegetation, whether it's for disaster management, whether it's for defense. The inference comes in first and the images can come in later. So there's a real-time analytics kind of a stack that we work with operators for, and that we see has a lot of legs from the use cases at a broad level, be it for disaster, be it for defense, be it for persistent monitoring solutions, is what the umbrella is about. And that's the area that we operate in. And that's where we see, be it in US or Europe, and now in India as well, we see that as a common requirement across the board.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I think you've all been a great audience. Thanks for those insightful questions. Vinay, Kevin, Awais, wishing you the best. I think the hopes of the private space tech ecosystem in this country rest heavily on the successes that you would be setting over the coming years. Wishing you all the very best. Thanks once again to the TIE Bangalore team for the opportunity to have this discussion. And my apologies for the next session for taking a few more minutes. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.